Hello, you are listening to The Wellness Project with Des. I'm your host, Desiree, a mental health therapist and holistic wellness coach. On my podcast, I interview experts in the field of mental health and wellness, as well as those who share their firsthand accounts of their mental health journeys. These interviews will give you many tips, tools, and strategies to improve your mental health, as well as give you hope, support, encouragement, and inspiration on your own personal mental health and wellness journey. Thanks so much for being here. I would greatly appreciate it if you took a moment to leave me a review on iTunes and leave the podcast 5 stars on Spotify. It really helps the podcast to grow, which in turn helps me to keep bringing on amazing guests and spreading mental health and wellness education and support. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey towards holistic well-being, unlocking the full potential of your mind, body, and spirit? If so, I'm thrilled to invite you to my program, the Holistic Wellness Transformation Coaching Program. My one-to-one coaching program is a comprehensive and individualized approach to help you improve your overall well-being. As a holistic wellness coach, I'm here to guide you on a transformative journey to attain balance and harmony in all areas of your life. With personalized coaching sessions, I'll offer guidance and support throughout your wellness journey. Starting with a thorough holistic assessment. We'll dive into your past, habits, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and patterns that may be holding you back and no longer serving you. This assessment forms the foundation for your customized wellness plan. Together, we'll explore the 8 foundational elements of wellness to ensure you feel balanced and aligned with your goals and your values. This program goes beyond the surface, providing you with mental and emotional support. I will help you to manage stress, anxiety, and other challenges such as perfectionism and people-pleasing, offering techniques and strategies to enhance your resilience and your skills. The benefits of this program cannot be overstated. I'll be there every step of the way to support you in achieving balance and harmony in your life, manage stress, and improve your emotional well-being. Nurture healthy connections, create lasting, healthy habits, achieve your goals, and gain confidence in your ability to transform your life. Join me on this journey to holistic wellness. You could go to my website to check out my various packages, and you could go to my Calendly link found in the show notes to schedule a free 30-minute consultation call where we will go over the 8 core areas of wellness, as well as your goals and your dream life. Reach out and let's get started on your wellness journey so you can finally live the life you want. Hey there, I'm your host Des, and you are listening to episode number 176. And on today's episode, we have Mia Hanks. Mia Hanks is here to talk with us about recovering from and healing from narcissistic abuse from her ex-husband of almost 30 years. Mia knew early on that things didn't feel right, but she didn't exactly know what the red flags were, what to look out for. She knew about narcissism, but had a feeling that her husband had narcissistic tendencies or traits, but she wasn't aware that he met criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm really glad that Mia is on here talking with us about this, because I'm sure if you've spent any time on the internet recently, you are aware that narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder has been quite the buzzword. And this is pretty frustrating coming from a mental health perspective, because narcissism, NPD, is very overly prescribed to people by the people in their life. And it's just important to keep in mind that a lot of people have narcissistic traits. That does not mean that they have NPD. And that goes for any sort of mental illness, mental health diagnosis. A lot of different traits, characteristics, symptoms cross different diagnoses, and just because you have some traits does not mean that you meet criteria for a mental illness or a mental health condition, diagnosis, whatever you want to call it. Someone in your life may have narcissistic traits. That does not mean that they have narcissistic personality disorder. So again, I'm really glad that Mia is on here today to talk with us about this, because I think NPD is something that's largely misunderstood. Mia suffered psychological abuse, and she's going to share her story and talk about that and talk about how this impacted her mentally, emotionally, physically, just on every level. If there is someone in your life that you suspect has narcissistic traits or NPD, I highly encourage you to see a therapist, sort this out, to talk about your options, talk about what you can do to better your mental health. There is help and support out there, and I hope that if you are struggling with this, if you are or have suffered from abuse, I hope that you find hope and inspiration in Mia's story, in how she has been able to recover. Help me welcome on Mia. All right, everyone. I am here with Mia Hanks. Mia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We are talking about narcissism and surviving narcissistic abuse. So, before we get into this conversation, I would love if you can introduce yourself and share your story with us.
So I'm Mia Hanks, and I was married to a covert narcissist for 29 years. Just under 30 years, I was basically a victim of narcissistic abuse. Today, I like to call myself a survivor of narcissistic abuse. But after I got out of my marriage and did some healing, I decided to write a memoir about my experiences. Yeah, that's kind of where I am today, and it's been a long journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing, so being married for that's a long time, 29 years. I guess when you first started dating, engaged, beginning stages of marriage, were there any sort of narcissistic tendencies that your husband exhibited?
There were, but at the time I was young. I was 21 when I got married. And so I was really naive. And I think I just didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what red flags, I didn't really know what red flags were, I think. And so looking back, I definitely see red flags, but I did not see them at the time. Narcissistic abuse, it never starts off bad. It sort of snowballs. So in the beginning, there's something called love bombing, where it's just excessive admiration, excessive attention, gifts, fancy dates. You're kind of blinded by that. And it's not until a little later that that mask starts to slip and you start to see these. In my case, it was just these small bits of control that I just wrote off as normal. But in retrospect, looking back, it wasn't normal. I just didn't know what to be on alert for. But I would say the biggest red flag that I saw early on was just a general lack of empathy.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that you bring that up because that's one of the reasons I'm so glad that you're here with us today sharing your story because so many people don't know what to look for. So many people don't know what those red flags are. And especially when you're in a relationship with someone and you love them and care about them, the little things that show through, I think it's kind of easy to maybe explain them away or want to look the other way, right? Not want to face that. I think it's really hard and it's not something you would expect and it's different. It's a different version of the person that you fell in love with.
Yeah, for sure. You're not looking for these things. And if you don't know what to look for, you do really write it off as well. Maybe this person has a few quirks, everybody has faults, and you start to make excuses for them. And then with narcissism, they use a lot of gaslighting techniques. So you're kind of conditioned over time to think that you are the problem. And anytime, I would bring up something that this was offensive or this really hurt me, his response was always the same, which was, well, you're just being too sensitive. Your perception of the event is skewed. You're not remembering things right. And so you do start to doubt yourself. And I did quite early on. All of those quote unquote red flags, you start to be able to, you think you can explain them away. And that's what I did for a lot of years.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now if we could go back a little bit, can you define narcissism in your own words for our listeners?
Yeah, so narcissism, as humans, we all have narcissistic traits. It's just part of being human. But then you get into narcissism where it's more woven into who that person is. And beyond that, you have narcissistic personality disorder, which is where my ex-husband falls. Just like you hear about narcissism, in the media, you would think that it would be just this pompous, arrogant, everything's about them. My husband was a covert narcissist. The difference there is that he didn't portray himself as being this real arrogant, pompous character. In public, he was very humble and kind and generous, and everybody thought he was wonderful. But behind closed doors, these covert narcissists, they are self-serving. Everything has to be about them and for them. These people are really not able to see things from other people's perspectives, and they cannot self-reflect. These are not easy people to deal with. At their core, they're very controlling, they're very manipulating, and they'll basically do whatever they need to do to make things go their way. They don't take no for an answer, and it's just basically the world revolves around them.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Are you able to also explain what gaslighting is?
Yeah, so gaslighting is a technique that's used by pretty much all narcissists. And it's basically they change the narrative, So if you call them out on something, they're going to turn that around and spin it where it looks like either you're going crazy, that you've remembered it wrong, that you've perceived it wrong, or that there's something wrong with you. My husband would say, a normal person wouldn't be offended by that or wouldn't be upset by that. You're too sensitive, you get your feelings hurt too easy, and you really do start to internalize that and think, well, maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion. And that's what I did a lot. Things that were a big deal, he convinced me they weren't. So gaslighting, really, you're just changing the narrative in somebody's mind to make them think that either they're going crazy or their memory is failing them or there's just something wrong with them at their core.
Thank you so much for explaining that. I think that's so important for people to know because you're so in it and you're in this relationship with somebody you love, right? You don't know at first that this is what you're dealing with and you're dealing with a narcissistic personality, either traits or a disorder. At what point did you begin to realize that narcissistic personality disorder was what your husband was exhibiting?
I think I was realizing fairly early in my marriage, probably 5 years in, I'm realizing something's not right. But I was young, and I think we all get into marriages and you don't want to see your marriage fail, you want it to work. And so I just felt like, if we can just get past this stage in life, this stress, that stress, it'll be better. And so I kept kind of sweeping it under the rug, so to speak. And then a few years in, I had 2 kids, and then you really do feel stuck and you feel like I really can't get out. I just did what I thought I had to do to make it work. But narcissism doesn't get better. People who think that, well, if I just stay with them a little bit longer and we get to this next stage of life, it will be better. It does not get better. It only gets worse with age. Probably around year 26, 27, I was having so many physical responses to all of the stress that I was under. I was sick all the time. I was dealing with chronic pain. It came down to I had to do something because my body was falling apart. So what I did was I started doing some research online, and that's kind of how I was able to put the pieces together. And then after that, sought out a therapist. But yeah, I mean, he is a textbook covert narcissist. And once I was able to put a name with what was happening, I was able to see it a little more clearer. And then I knew I had to get out.
Okay, so what kind of research were you doing? Like, what were you actually like typing in? What kind of were you typing in like traits or different things that he would do? Like, how did you come to find out about narcissism?
I always, in my mind, thought he was narcissistic. And so I was typing in that. But what I started looking at was just toxic relationships. I got to just realizing that this relationship isn't healthy. And so I started doing some reading on what does a healthy relationship look like? And I took all these online quizzes, is your relationship toxic and that sort of thing. Just looking at relationship problems, unhealthy relationships, and then knowing that he was narcissistic, I was able to find enough articles and just do enough reading. And I looked at the DSM criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. I did a lot of reading. And interestingly enough, we were in marriage counseling at the time, which was his idea. So he wanted to go to therapy to talk about what was wrong with me. Fortunately, we had a good therapist who had some experience in this area. When I was doing a one-on-one meeting with her, I told her my suspicions. I said, I've been doing this research and I really think I'm looking at narcissistic personality disorder. And she agreed wholeheartedly. It all kind of came together. And once I figured it out, I felt validated.
So glad that you had a great therapist that was able to talk you through that and to help you with that. So you did talk about this a little bit. So you mentioned kind of you were having physical responses and chronic pain. Throughout your relationship, how was his narcissism impacting your mental health?
I think it was impacting it negatively from the very early days of our relationship. I mean, he sort of over the years conditioned me to think that basically I couldn't survive on my own. I couldn't do anything for myself. I wasn't capable. I really thought that. I really did. Narcissists will completely tear down your self-esteem because you see, they want to keep you dependent on them because that's a means of control for them. I had probably weak boundaries going into the marriage. I had never been in a situation where I really needed to have strong boundaries. I had always been in what I would call safe situations. So I never developed real strong boundaries. And that's why I think narcissists will deplete your boundaries, what little you have. So I would say after a few years in this relationship, I had no boundaries. I had very little self-esteem and just very little feeling that I could really accomplish anything without him. And then, as it goes on, you really do start to experience physical symptoms as the result of the stress. So it hits you mentally and physically both.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm just wondering, because you were in this relationship for so long, were your family or friends aware of what was going on?
My parents were aware. They were the only ones that actually witnessed his controlling, manipulative behavior. Everyone else on the outside, he sort of wore this mask that he was this great guy. And all of our friends, we didn't have a lot of friends, but the friends that we did have, they thought he was the perfect husband. I mean, he was a very good actor. But my parents did see it fairly early on. They did talk to me about it. They really didn't like things they were seeing and just his level of control over me. But I was what they call trauma bonded, more or less. And, I would defend him, which put my parents in a difficult place because I was over here saying, oh no, he's perfectly fine. And he's just under some stress and, just give him a break. It's all good. Really, no one was able to convince me. I had to reach a breaking point where I had to convince myself that something was very wrong.
Okay. And are you able to share that breaking point? So it sounds like your breaking point came before the couples therapy. Is that right?
Around about that time, yeah, maybe a little bit before, my body was just literally breaking down. I was so sleep deprived, and I just felt like I was just going to have some sort of nervous breakdown at any moment. But it was interesting. One evening, I was scrolling through social media, and I think I was on Instagram, and I came across a quote, and it just really hit me. And it was about true intimacy. And the quote was saying that true intimacy isn't necessarily physical. It's more about being able to look at your partner and say, I feel safe with you. And I think that word safe really grabbed me. And I thought, wow, I don't think I've ever felt safe with him, like not even for a second. That's kind of where I started telling myself, I need to look at this because this really is something's wrong. That's when I really started diving in and doing a lot of reading and researching, just trying to figure out what's going on here. It had just been going on for so long, and I was so conditioned to think this was normal. I really had to kind of rewire my brain a little bit. It took a while to convince myself that this really is wrong and I need to get out.
Wow, but I really love that. And I love that you mentioned that because I love conversations like this. And that's one of the reasons that I love social media because it is really spreading awareness. Like you saw something just scrolling on Instagram and it really resonated with you. And I mean, it kind of changed the course of your life.
It really did. I mean, you never know if you read a quote or you read something at just the right time, it can change your life. Having never come across that quote, the exact moment that I did, I mean, I don't know where I'd be right now. Hopefully, I'd like to think that this therapist would have convinced me to leave and, but I don't know. I think I needed to kind of convince myself first. So you really never know when, you put awareness information out there, it could really hit somebody right at the right time and change the whole trajectory of their life.
Yeah, I really love that. And so, can you walk us through? So, you go to couples therapy, you have this one on one session with your therapist, you're talking through your concerns, they're agreeing with you. Can you walk us through what this looks like then, formulating your ideas or your plans to leave? How did this all look going forward once you were aware of the kind of full situation and what you were dealing with?
Well, the first thing I did was I slowly moved out and I moved in with my parents. I was talking with this therapist during this time, and she was telling me, you need to leave. Therapists don't necessarily say that to very many people. This therapist saw no path forward for us, with him specifically. She was encouraging me, yes, you need to permanently move out and not go back. And so basically, that's what I did. I moved in with my parents, and it was a very scary time because, like I say, with a narcissist, they don't take the word no very easily. I didn't know how that would trigger him. Of course, it made him angry. It was in his mind, I was deserting him and I was doing something horrible to him. He never wanted to consider, what he had done to cause me to leave. It was a tense time, but that's basically what I did. I moved in with my parents, and this is, I think, a really important aspect to all of this. I did have somewhere to go. A lot of women don't. And the problem is that with narcissism, they get so angry. And so what my ex-husband did and what they'll do oftentimes is financial abuse. So his first action was really to try to drain the bank accounts so that I couldn't access any money, because narcissists use money as control. And they think, well, and my ex-husband thought, if she doesn't have any money to live on, she'll have no choice but to come back. That's a huge factor, I think, for a lot of women, and the reason that a lot of women aren't able to leave or feel like they can't leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And another piece to this is you had children, you said, right? You had two kids?
Yes, but at the time when I left, both of my kids had graduated high school. So they were both basically adults. And that did make it a lot easier. So I was able to just kind of make a clean break. Whereas if I'd had younger kids, it gets a lot more complicated.
Yes, absolutely. And so you don't have to share if you don't feel comfortable, but are your children aware that their father has NPD?
They are, yes. I think the younger one wasn't quite as in tune to it as the older one was, but definitely, yeah, they do. And they were happy for me when I left. In fact, both of them told me they wished I had done this 15 years ago. Of course, hindsight is 2020, but they are aware, and they have a good relationship with him, but they are aware of that he was abusive to me, and it's created some good conversation with me and my kids, because we've been able to talk through, this wasn't a healthy relationship. You didn't witness a healthy marriage, and we've been able to talk through what are these red flags and what should you look out for, and it has created some interesting conversation. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad to hear that. And so, for loved ones that are witnessing their loved one being in a relationship with somebody with NPD, do you have any advice for loved ones, family members, friends, like how they can help, what they can do to support?
It's really hard because the victims who are trapped in these relationships, it's almost like, if you've heard of Stockholm syndrome, that's kind of what you're living with. It is almost a form of brainwashing. So it is next to impossible to convince these victims that they are being abused and that they need to get out. For people on the outside looking in and seeing this, it's got to be maddening to watch because you think they just can't they see what's going on here and can't they get out? And I think I would say, as far as my advice, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, you can do your best to make them aware and educate them about these personality disorders, but really, you have to be patient with them, really, and realize that they are basically being brainwashed and they are in effect trauma bonded. I guess my advice, don't get frustrated with them because it's a very tricky thing. They've been so psychologically abused and damaged that it's not easy to just pick up and say, well, this is not healthy. I need to get out. So yeah, I would just say be patient and try not to be frustrated with these victims.
I think that's great advice because, like you said, there's only so much that they can do, but to be there and to be supportive of them, to be someone that they can go to. And if you could share, so you leave the relationship, you're with your parents, how do you go forward? What did your healing journey look like?
It was difficult. I dealt with a tremendous amount of guilt. And, probably at some point every day I thought to myself, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if it's okay that I left. I needed so much validation. And one thing I kept saying is, not every day was bad. We had good times. And that was just weighing on me because I thought, I'm not sure if it's okay that I left because every day wasn't bad. That was the hardest part for me. And it was really interesting because one day I was talking with a friend about this exact thing. Not every day was bad. And my friend said, you're trying to make this into a math equation. Like one good day cancels out a bad day. And I thought, yeah, and that is what I was doing. And my friend said, you have to realize that there are not enough good days in the world to make up for a day of trauma, that he put you through. Even a little bit of trauma is too much. And so that really helped me shed that guilt. I was also in therapy. I probably was in therapy for a year. It took a year for me to finally file the divorce papers. I mean, I had to do a lot of healing to even get to the point where I could file those papers. So it was a long process.
Yeah, definitely. And can you share kind of, I guess, besides therapy, what did your day-to-day look like? What kind of tools and strategies did you take away from therapy?
Therapy was real helpful. I found that I tended to want to isolate. It was such a strange time in my life. I had been married since I was 21 years old. So it was a strange time. I suddenly had all this freedom that I had never experienced before. So it was kind of exciting. But at the same time, I was still for a while dealt with guilt. I tended to want to isolate. So I had to be very intentional about making sure I got out every day, even if it was just going to the grocery store, just get out and be amongst people. The other thing that I tried to do was talk a lot with family and friends, and that was a huge help, probably as helpful as going to therapy.
Oh, great. And I'm wondering too, since you said only your parents were really aware of what was going on and the abuse that you were dealing with and suffering, when you opened up, when you began to realize that you were a victim of narcissistic abuse, when you began to open up to your friends and your loved ones, were they shocked because you had said that they had thought that he was the perfect husband? How did they react to you finally coming to this realization and sharing it with them?
Well, my parents had witnessed a lot of it, but even they were shocked when they realized, I think, the extent of it and how much damage there had been. As far as like mutual friends that we had together, right after I left, he more or less started this kind of smear campaign where I think he was, trying to save face, basically. Most of those people, I think, don't believe me at all. He's a great guy, and they still to this day think that. So I had to just come to terms with it is what it is and let them He was out there trying to collect our friends, and I just had to let that go. So yeah, I don't think a lot of mutual friends believed me. No. But it was more that, of course, my family believes me and like, close friends that I've had for years and years and years. That part was hard, definitely. The people that knew him well, I think they all kind of sided with him, so to speak, because they just really think he's great. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard to watch that, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, that must have been really hard. But it sounds like you have a great perspective on that and that you were able to let that go. And I would love if you can share what your life looks like today.
Today it's very different than it was 5 years ago. I've written a book. I'm really hoping that it can help people that are in the situation that I was in. I'm trying to promote it, and I'm basically just trying to do a lot of work with awareness, education about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. I think it's something we're not talking about very much. And just the whole concept of psychological abuse, mental abuse, it's something that gets overlooked because it's not physical and there's no proof. And so it's something that's just not talked about. So yeah, I'm trying to spread awareness as best I can. I have a TikTok page where I try to, post a lot, just different, little clips and education about narcissism and narcissistic abuse.
Oh, great. Mia, I'm so happy that you're here today sharing all of this and sharing your story because it is so important. And I think this awareness is so necessary and can really change other people's lives. What advice do you have or words of wisdom would you give to someone who suspects that they are in a relationship with a narcissist?
I would say you really need to do that research and figure it out, and if in fact you are, you need to realize that it's not going to get better. I mean, I know that sounds really doom and gloom, but it's damaging. And the other big thing that I think happens to a lot of people is they just simply feel stuck. They feel like they can't get out of these relationships. And a lot of times it is because of that financial abuse. They just don't have access to money to get out. But I would tell people, there are resources and there is help out there. It's easy to feel stuck, but realize that you're not stuck. You absolutely can get out. There is such a better life on the other side of narcissistic abuse.
Oh, great. Mia, thank you so much for being here today. Can you please share where everyone can find you and tell us about your memoir and where we can find that?
My website is miajhanks.com, and there's a link to purchase my book there, but it's available everywhere online books are sold: Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, and it's available in ebook and paperback. And it's called Bridemaid, a Memoir.
Oh, perfect. And I will link to all of that in the show notes. Everyone, please go check out Mia, check out her memoir. So important. Mia, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your such an important story for everyone to hear.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I really hope that you liked this episode and gained a lot of value from it. If you did like this episode, please share it on social media. You can tag me at The Wellness Project with Des on Instagram and at According to Des on Facebook. If you do enjoy my podcast and gain value from it, I would greatly appreciate your support. You can show your love and support by buying me a coffee. This will help my podcast to grow and in turn will help me to keep bringing on amazing guests. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/the wellness project with Des to show your support. All books written by or recommended by my amazing podcast guests are listed on my Amazon storefront. Go to the link in the show notes to check out those books. I would love to extend an invite to you to become a part of my community. You can do this through Facebook, where we will be discussing this episode. I would love for you to share your insights, any aha moments, any thoughts or ideas you would like to contribute. You can contribute in the discussion taking place in my Facebook group, and it's a great place to connect with me because I am in there every day with mental health and wellness content, discussions, reflections, journal prompts. It's a fun and supportive place to be. You can find the group at facebook.com/groups/according to Des, and that link will also be in the show notes. You can also check out more of what I'm doing on my website, accordingtodes.com. You'll find a lot of wellness blogs, written interviews, detailed podcast show notes, and my shop where you will be able to find workshops, my self-care course, digital downloads, ebooks. There's a lot going on my website, so make sure you check that out at accordingtodez.com. And while you're there, join my email list to stay in the know about what I have going on and available for you. When you sign up, you will get your free ebook, The 5 Stress Reduction Techniques to help you feel more relaxed. Thank you so much for being here. I will talk to you next week. So until then, I hope you have a calm and peaceful week.